I wasn't supposed to see it. Claire had left her phone on my desk before stepping into a meeting, the screen locked, resting beside the stack of documents I was reviewing. It wasn't unusual. She was always leaving things behind, moving too fast, too busy with her next deal, her next acquisition, her next power move. I had spent years accepting that about her. But then, a message preview flashed across the screen. Liam, looking forward to our private meeting later. Last night was incredible. You make me feel so alive. I froze. My brain struggled to process what I had just read, as if the words had been written in a language I no longer understood. But there was no misunderstanding this. Claire, my wife, the woman I had given 20 years of my life to, Liam Bennett, her 28-year-old executive assistant. The betrayal hit like a punch to the gut, leaving me winded. My hand trembled as I picked up her phone. I knew I shouldn't. I knew that opening it would bring nothing but pain, but I did it anyway. Her phone was unlocked. Maybe it was habit, maybe it was arrogance, or maybe Claire had never expected me to look. I swiped up, opening the messaging app, and immediately saw everything. Liam, I love how dangerous this feels. Meeting in the office after hours? You're insatiable. Claire, you bring it out of me. You make me feel things Ethan never did. A slow, suffocating heat spread through my chest. I kept scrolling. More messages. More stolen moments. More proof. 6 months. That's how long this had been going on. 6 months of stolen nights, whispered meetings, tangled sheets, and shared secrets. The same amount of time since she hired him. I should have seen it. The extra hours, the sudden weekend, work retreats. The way she had begun keeping her phone face down on the table whenever we had dinner together. But I had trusted her. I had believed in the woman I had built a life with, the woman whose career I had sacrificed my own ambitions for, the woman I had spent decades supporting. And for what? So she could throw it all away for a younger, ambitious assistant? The rage I expected never came. Instead, I felt something else. Cold, calculated clarity. Claire had always been the ruthless one in business, but I had been the one teaching her strategy. She thought she was untouchable, that she had all the power, but she had forgotten something crucial. She had married the wrong man to betray. I put the phone back exactly where she had left it. I wasn't going to confront her. Not yet. Confrontation would only give her time to cover her tracks. I had played the fool for 6 months, but now, the game was mine. I knew Claire better than anyone. I knew how she operated, how she manipulated, how she controlled every piece of the chessboard. But there was one thing she had forgotten. I was better, and she was about to learn that when you go to war, you should never underestimate your enemy. I didn't confront Claire. Not yet. Confrontation would only give her time to cover her tracks, to manipulate the narrative, to twist her infidelity into something that made me the villain. No, I wasn't giving her that opportunity. Instead, I did what I did best. I strategized. Claire had always prided herself on being the smartest person in the room, but what she had forgotten was that I was the one who taught her how to think that way. Before she was the CEO of Stratos Corp, before she became the woman the business world both admired and feared, she was just a driven, ambitious woman standing next to me, learning the art of the game. And now? Now, she was the one about to be played. I started with information gathering. Claire and I had been married long enough that I knew where she kept everything. Her laptop, her financial records, her personal files. Her arrogance worked in my favor. She never hid things from me because she never thought I'd go looking. That night, after she had gone to bed, I powered up her laptop. The first place I checked was her email. At first glance, it was professional. Stratos Corp reports, investor updates, board meeting schedules. But Claire wasn't sloppy. She wouldn't use her company email for an affair. So I dug deeper. And then I found it. A hidden folder. Personal. Inside, there were emails. Dozens of them. Correspondence with Liam, booking confirmations for hotels, expense reports marked as client meetings but linked to private reservations. But there was something else. Financial transactions. At first, they didn't seem unusual. Claire moved money around all the time. She had access to accounts most people didn't even know existed. But as I traced the payments, something became clear. She wasn't just paying for hotel rooms. She was funneling company money directly to Liam. A slow smirk spread across my face. This wasn't just infidelity. This was corporate fraud. Claire wasn't just cheating on me. She was jeopardizing her entire empire for her boy toy. And that was when I knew exactly how I would take her down. The next morning, Claire was in full CEO mode. She breezed through the kitchen, dressed in one of her power suits, coffee in hand, rattling off her schedule for the day like I was still the man who cared to listen. "Big day today," she said, pressing a quick kiss to my cheek like nothing had changed. "Board meeting at 10. Then I have some private discussions in the afternoon." I barely stopped myself from laughing. Private discussions. Right. I played my role perfectly. The oblivious, supportive husband. The man she still thought she had under her thumb. And while she went off to run her empire, I made a call. Ava Sinclair, a senior board member at Stratos Corp. Ava had always distrusted Claire, not because she wasn't capable, but because she was too secretive, too ruthless. Ava was the kind of woman who played by the rules, and she had suspected for a while that Claire was making moves that weren't entirely ethical. She picked up on the first ring. "Ethan." Her voice was cautious. "What's going on?" I didn't waste time. "I need to show you something. You're not going to believe it." There was a pause. Then she said, "Meet me at the Stratos Corp Executive Lounge at noon." I smiled. Claire had no idea what was coming. That night, I forwarded the screenshots from Claire's phone, but also the financial documents I had found on her laptop. Transactions linked to Liam. Money shifting into personal accounts. Ava's response came almost instantly. "Ava, meet me first thing tomorrow. This changes everything." I stared at the message for a long time, feeling the first spark of satisfaction since I had seen those texts. Claire had spent 6 months lying to me, betraying me, treating me like an afterthought. But she had made one crucial mistake. She forgot that the man she was cheating on was smarter than her. And I was about to prove it. The morning sun streamed through the windows as I sat at the kitchen island, sipping my coffee, my mind already miles ahead, strategizing my next move. Claire moved around the kitchen in her usual morning routine, checking her phone, responding to emails, giving me that effortless smile that had once fooled me into thinking we were a team. But now, I saw her for exactly what she was. A woman who had betrayed me. A woman who thought she was untouchable. A woman who was about to lose everything. She placed her empty mug in the sink and smoothed down her perfectly tailored blazer. "Big day today," she said, her tone casual, like she hadn't just spent the last 6 months sleeping with another man. I forced a small smile. "What's on the agenda?" "Board meeting at 10, she said, grabbing her briefcase. "Then I have some private discussions later this afternoon." I almost laughed. Private discussions. Right. She leaned in and kissed my cheek, the way she always did before leaving for work. But this time, I didn't close my eyes, didn't sink into the familiarity of it. Instead, I watched her, memorizing every detail. The way she carried herself, the way she masked her lies so effortlessly. She had no idea that this was the last time she'd ever walk into Stratos Corp as its queen. I waited exactly 15 minutes after she left before following. Stratos Corp's headquarters was a towering skyscraper, a symbol of the empire Claire had built with my support. I walked through the sleek glass doors, nodding at the receptionist as if I had every right to be there. Which, technically, I did. Claire might have been the face of the company, but I had been her shadow, the strategist behind the empire. I knew every inch of this building, every weakness in its structure, every pressure point in its foundation. I stepped into the executive lounge on the top floor, where Ava Sinclair and 2 other board members were waiting for me. Ava leaned back in her chair, her sharp eyes locking onto mine. "You better tell me this isn't a waste of my time, Ethan." I smirked and slid a folder across the table. "Take a look." She flipped it open, her face remaining unreadable as she skimmed through the contents. But I saw the moment everything changed. Her fingers tightened around the pages. Her lips pressed into a thin line. The other board members leaned in, their expressions darkening as they scanned the financial documents, the hidden transactions, the money Claire had funneled to Liam. Ava's gaze flicked up. "These are real?" I nodded, pulled directly from her laptop. She's been paying him company money? One of the board members swore under his breath. This is bad. I wasn't finished. I reached into my pocket and pulled out my phone. Check your inbox, I said. Ava grabbed her phone, her expression hardening as she opened the email I had just sent. The text messages. She read them in silence, her jaw tightening. Unbelievable, she muttered. I leaned forward. Claire isn't just having an affair with her assistant, I said. She's jeopardizing Stratoscorp's integrity. If this goes public, your investors will pull out. The board will have no choice but to take action. One of the other board members nodded. We need to act before this leaks. Ava's eyes were cold when she finally looked at me. What exactly are you hoping to gain from this, Ethan? I smirked. Justice. She studied me for a long moment, then gave a slow nod. All right, she said. Let's take her down. That was all I needed to hear. Claire had always been strategic in business, but she had underestimated the one person who knew her weaknesses better than anyone else. And now? Now, she was about to face the perfect storm, one she never saw coming. The boardroom was a testament to Claire's empire. Sleek, intimidating, and meticulously designed to exude power. Floor-to-ceiling windows overlooked the city. The glass conference table gleamed under recessed lighting, and every chair was positioned perfectly to reinforce hierarchy. For 20 years, Claire had ruled this room, her presence commanding, her decisions absolute. But today, she was walking into an ambush. I took my seat near Ava, my fingers tapping idly against the armrest as I watched the clock tick down. The room was already filled with board members, some whispering, others pretending to scroll through their phones, avoiding eye contact. They all knew something was coming. At exactly 11:58 a.m., the doors opened and Claire walked in. She carried herself with the same effortless confidence as always, her navy power suit crisp, her hair pulled into an immaculate chignon. She moved like she owned the world, her presence sending an unspoken message. She was in control. She was untouchable. Until she saw me. Her confident stride faltered, her perfectly rehearsed expression flickering into something else. Confusion. Surprise. A tiny crack in the mask. She blinked. Ethan? What are you doing here? Ava leaned back in her chair, her nails tapping against the table. Take a seat, Claire. We need to discuss some concerning findings. The color drained from her face. For the first time since I had discovered her affair, I allowed myself to truly enjoy this moment. Claire hesitated, but she couldn't afford to look weak in front of her own board. She straightened her shoulders and took her seat at the head of the table. The room fell silent. Ava didn't waste time. She slid a printed document across the table, her expression deadly calm. Claire, do you recognize these transactions? Claire's gaze dropped to the papers in front of her. I watched as her pupils dilated, her grip tightening on the edges of the paper. She knew. She knew exactly what she was looking at. But Claire was nothing if not quick. She lifted her chin, schooling her expression into something impassive. These are internal financial records, she said smoothly. Why are we discussing them in a board meeting? Ava's lips curled into something that wasn't quite a smile. Because these records show that you've been making unauthorized payments to your executive assistant, Liam Bennett. The tension in the room thickened. One of the board members cleared his throat. These payments don't appear to have any valid business justification. Claire's jaw tightened. That's ridiculous. I leaned forward, finally speaking. Is it? Her head snapped toward me, eyes narrowing. Ava reached for another folder. We also received additional documentation this morning. Screenshots, personal correspondences. She pulled out a printed text message exchange and slid it across the table. I knew exactly what it said. Liam *** last night was incredible. You make me feel so alive. Claire's entire body stiffened. Silence. A suffocating silence. I watched as she clenched her jaw, her mind racing to find an escape route. She turned to me, her voice controlled but strained. Ethan, this is a personal matter. You had no right. I cut her off. You made it a business matter when you used company funds to finance your affair. Claire's mask slipped. That's a lie. Ava raised a brow. Then you won't mind if we conduct a formal audit? A flicker of panic. It was subtle, just a tiny shift in her posture, the way her fingers curled slightly against the tabletop. But I saw it. We all saw it. One of the senior board members, a man named Harrington, exhaled sharply. Claire, this puts the company in a very difficult position. She turned to him, her voice measured. I assure you, this is being blown out of proportion, is it? Ava cut in. Because if these allegations are true, we'll have no choice but to conduct a full-scale investigation. Investors won't like this. The press won't like this. She leaned forward, lowering her voice. And you really won't like this. Claire's breathing hitched. For the first time in her boardroom, she was no longer the most powerful person in the room. I leaned in, my voice calm, lethal. You weren't just cheating on me, Claire. You were stealing from your own company. The boardroom erupted. Some members exchanged glances, whispers breaking out, tension thickening like a storm about to crack open. Claire turned to Liam. It was instinct, a knee-jerk reaction, but the damage was already done. Because Liam? Liam looked terrified. His hands were clasped together too tightly, his throat bobbing as he swallowed, his entire body screaming guilt. The board members noticed. Ava's voice sliced through the air. Liam, would you care to explain these transactions? Liam's mouth opened, but no words came out. Claire's head snapped back to me, her eyes burning with fury, betrayal, desperation. She had expected to be confronted privately. She had expected to lie her way out. She had never expected to be exposed in front of the people who controlled her career. I sat back, watching as her empire crumbled around her. Claire always thought she was the smartest person in the room. She forgot that I had spent 20 years learning exactly how she operated. And now, she was watching her kingdom burn. Claire's face paled as the weight of the moment finally settled on her. The power she had wielded in this boardroom for years was slipping through her fingers like sand, and she knew it. She had built Stratos Corp into a corporate empire, controlled every aspect of its image, and ensured no one dared to question her authority. Until today, the silence in the boardroom was suffocating, heavy with anticipation. Everyone was waiting for her to speak, to salvage whatever was left of her dignity. But for the first time in her career, she had nothing. I can explain, she began, her voice unervingly steady despite the chaos swirling around her. Ava cut her off, sliding another set of documents across the table. We don't need explanations, Claire. We need answers. Claire hesitated, her fingers twitching as she glanced down at the papers. They weren't just transaction records. They were evidence. Her face barely twitched, but I knew her well enough to see it. The flicker of panic beneath her calm exterior. I folded my arms, my voice cold. You used company funds to support your affair. You put the company's reputation at risk. Do you really think this is something you can just explain away? She turned to me sharply, her expression shifting from damage control to anger. You set me up? I arched a brow. Oh, so now you're the victim? Her eyes narrowed. This is personal. You brought our marriage into my company. I leaned forward, my voice like ice. No, Claire, you did. The moment you decided to funnel company money to your little executive assistant, you made this a business issue. She exhaled sharply, gripping the edge of the table like it was the only thing keeping her steady. Ava cleared her throat. Claire, we've already begun reviewing all financial activities tied to these accounts. The findings so far are concerning. We have no choice but to escalate this. The word hung in the air. Escalate. Claire wasn't stupid. She knew exactly what that meant. It meant a formal investigation. It meant legal action. It meant the beginning of the end. She turned to Liam, her jaw tight. Say something, she hissed under her breath. But Liam looked like he wanted to sink into the floor and disappear. He had been riding the high of Claire's attention, basking in the luxury and power she provided. Now, he was realizing just how fast that could all be taken away. I didn't know about the money, Liam stammered, voice unconvincing. I thought it was legitimate. I let out a short, humorless laugh. Right. Because a six-figure consulting fee to someone with no executive experience makes perfect sense. The board members exchanged glances, some murmuring amongst themselves. Claire was losing them. The people who had once blindly trusted her were now questioning everything. Ava adjusted her glasses. Effective immediately, we are launching a full-scale audit of all financial transactions under your authorization, Claire. Claire's lips parted slightly. This wasn't just bad. This was catastrophic. She looked at me again, and this time, there was no anger. No arrogance. Just quiet, raw disbelief. You did this to me, she whispered. I met her gaze, my expression unreadable. No, Claire. You did this to yourself. For the first time in years, she had no control. No power. Nothing. Ava turned to the board. This meeting is adjourned. We'll reconvene after the initial audit results come in. One by one, the board members stood, gathering their things, leaving Claire sitting there alone. Her empire had begun to collapse, and I was standing right in the center of the wreckage. And I felt nothing but satisfaction. The fallout began before Claire even left the boardroom. The second the meeting adjourned, board members murmured amongst themselves in hushed, urgent tones, their expressions shifting from disbelief to quiet resolve. The empire Claire had spent years building was now crumbling beneath her, and for once in her life, she wasn't the one pulling the strings. I watched her sit there, motionless, as people filed out of the room one by one, leaving her alone in the wreckage. The woman who had once commanded this space with unwavering authority now looked small, like she was realizing for the first time how quickly power could slip through her fingers. She finally turned to me. Her eyes weren't cold anymore. They were desperate. You really want to destroy me, she whispered. I studied her, letting the silence stretch between us. I had spent 20 years building a life with this woman, standing beside her through every career milestone, sacrificing my own ambitions to support hers. And what had she done in return? Lied, cheated, risked everything for a younger man who had already abandoned her the moment things got tough. Destroy you? I said, my voice eerily calm. No, Claire. I just want you to finally face the consequences of your own actions. Her jaw tightened, but there was no more fight in her. She knew she had lost. Without another word, she stood, smoothed out her blazer, an instinctual attempt at regaining composure, and walked out. I let out a slow breath, feeling a weight lift off my chest as I watched her go. But this wasn't over. Not yet. Claire's empire was beginning to fall, but I wasn't finished. Not until the entire world saw the woman behind the mask. The public scandal less than 24 hours later, the news broke. I sat in my home office, watching as every major business outlet flashed the same headline across their screens. Stratos Corp CEO under investigation for financial misconduct. Claire's picture was everywhere. Once the face of power and success, now the face of corporate corruption and betrayal. The paparazzi swarmed our house. Investors pulled their funding. Stratos Corp's stocks plummeted overnight. Ava had wasted no time. She had made sure the audit results were leaked to the press, allowing the public to judge Claire before she even had a chance to spin the narrative. And Liam? He was fired immediately. Rumors swirled that he had tried to reach out to Claire, but she had cut him off the second he became more of a liability than a distraction. How poetic. She had thrown away 20 years of marriage for a man who had never truly cared about her. I exhaled, watching the chaos unfold on the screen. The camera flashes, the headlines, the frantic reporters speculating on Claire's fate. But I wasn't done. I opened my laptop and pulled up the divorce papers. I had been waiting for this moment. Claire had spent years branding herself as the untouchable queen of the corporate world. But now, she was about to become its greatest disgrace. The storm I unleashed was far from over. Claire might have lost control of Stratos Corp, but there was still one battle left, our divorce. I wasn't going to let her slither away, retreat into a quiet settlement where she could rebuild her reputation. No, she was going to face everything. She called me the night after the news broke. I was expecting it. Her number flashed on my screen, and for a moment, I debated whether I should ignore it. But no, I wanted to hear her voice. I wanted to hear the woman who had lied to me, betrayed me, and assumed I would always stand in her shadow, beg. I picked up. There was silence at first, then a shaky breath. Ethan, she whispered. I leaned back in my chair, staring at my reflection in the dark window of my office. Claire. More silence. Then, can we meet? I already knew why. She wanted damage control. She wanted to find a way to spin this, manipulate me one last time. I wasn't going to give her that. Fine, I said, my voice emotionless. Tomorrow. Noon. I hung up before she could say anything else. The last plea the next day. I arrived at the penthouse we had shared for years. The place that had once been our home. Now, it felt cold, lifeless. Just like our marriage. Claire was already there, waiting. She looked different. Not the confident CEO. Not the woman who once walked into a room knowing she owned it. She looked hollow. For the first time since this started, I saw it. The weight of everything she had lost. She had built an empire and watched it collapse in a matter of days. She had built a marriage and destroyed it with her own hands. And now, she was standing in front of me, realizing I was the only person left who had ever truly stood by her. Her lip trembled. Ethan, please. I stared at her, waiting. She swallowed hard, stepping closer. I made a mistake. I tilted my head. Which one? The affair? The fraud? Or the part where you thought you could get away with both? She flinched. I know I hurt you. Do you? I said coldly. She bit her lip. I held up a hand. Don't stand here and pretend this is about me. This is about you, Claire. You're not sorry for what you did. You're sorry you lost. Tears welled in her eyes. I loved you, Ethan. I laughed. A dry, bitter sound. No, Claire. You loved power. You loved control. And when you realized you couldn't control me anymore, you threw me away. She shook her head. It wasn't like that. Then what was it like? I snapped. Explain it to me. Explain how sleeping with Liam made our marriage stronger. Explain how stealing from your own company was a strategic move. Go on, Claire. I'm listening. Her shoulders shook. I don't know. I took a slow step forward, lowering my voice. That's the problem, isn't it? You don't know how to fix something once it's broken. You only know how to keep taking until there's nothing left. She reached for my hand. Ethan, please. I can't do this without you. I stared down at her fingers, delicate, manicured, once a symbol of the woman I would have done anything for. Now, they meant nothing. I pulled away. You already did. The silence stretched, thick and suffocating. Then, finally, I pulled the divorce papers from my briefcase and slid them onto the table. Her breath hitched. Sign them, I said, and don't drag this out. We both know how it ends. Claire stared at the papers like they were a death sentence. Maybe they were. Maybe this was the moment she realized she had lost me for good. Her lips parted, like she wanted to fight it, like she wanted to find a way to pull me back in. But there was nothing left to say. Finally, she swallowed and nodded. I'll sign them. I exhaled slowly, letting the weight of it settle over me. It was done. I turned, heading for the door. Just as I reached it, she spoke again. Ethan? I didn't turn around. She hesitated. Do you ever think about what we had? Do you ever think about what we had? Claire's voice wavered behind me, stripped of the authority and control she had once carried so effortlessly. There was no longer a trace of the woman who used to walk into a room and make everyone fall in line. No trace of the CEO who had built an empire from the ground up. For a brief moment, I let myself consider her question. Did I ever think about what we had? I turned my head slightly, just enough to glance at her over my shoulder. Her hands trembled as they hovered above the divorce papers. Her gaze locked onto them like they contained the sum total of all her failures. What we had, I said slowly, died the moment you chose someone else over me. She squeezed her eyes shut, as if my words physically hurt, but she didn't deny it. She couldn't. I took a slow step toward her, closing the distance just enough for her to feel the weight of my presence. Tell me something, Claire, I murmured, my voice steady. If I had never found out, if I had never seen the texts, never exposed the financial fraud, would you still be standing here, asking me if I think about what we had? She exhaled sharply, her eyes fluttering open. I tilted my head, waiting. Her lips parted, but she said nothing. That silence was my answer. I let out a humorless chuckle, shaking my head. That's what I thought. I turned away, heading toward the door. Ethan, wait. I paused, not because I wanted to, but because part of me was curious. Not about her answer, but about how far she would go to rewrite the story in her favor. She took a deep breath. I know I don't deserve forgiveness, and I know I can't undo what I did. But I did love you. I let the words hang in the air between us, waiting for them to have some kind of effect on me. But they didn't. I had spent years loving Claire. Years giving her everything. My time, my support, my loyalty. And she had thrown it all away for a cheap affair with an assistant who had already abandoned her the moment her world started crumbling. Now, she wanted to talk about love? I exhaled slowly, shaking my head. No, Claire. You didn't love me. You loved the life I gave you. You loved the fact that I stood beside you while you built your career. You loved that I sacrificed my own ambitions so you could chase yours. But me? I turned to face her fully. You never loved me. Her bottom lip trembled. That's not true. Then why was I never enough? I asked, my voice dangerously quiet. She swallowed hard, looking away. I didn't push for an answer. Because, deep down, I already knew it. I had never been part of her plan. I was a stepping stone, the man who helped her build the foundation for her success. And once she had everything she ever wanted, she had convinced herself she didn't need me anymore. Until now. Now, she was losing everything, and suddenly, she remembered that I had always been there, steady and unwavering. But I wasn't going to be there anymore. I took the divorce papers from the table and placed them directly in front of her. Sign them, I said, my voice void of emotion. Let's end this. Her fingers hovered over the pen, her breathing uneven. She hesitated. Do you really want this? I arched a brow. You really think there's another option? She let out a shuddering breath. Then, with a single nod, she picked up the pen and, for the first time in her life, accepted defeat. She signed. The sound of the pen scratching against the paper was final. I watched as she set the pen down, her hands lingering over the document as if she could somehow take it all back. But she couldn't. This was the end. For the first time in a long time, I felt free. I reached for the papers, tucking them into my briefcase. I'll have my lawyer finalize everything, I said, turning toward the door. As I placed my hand on the doorknob, her voice stopped me one last time. Ethan, I sighed, bracing myself. What? Her voice was barely a whisper. Are you going to be okay? I let out a slow breath, considering her words. Then, I smiled. I already am. I opened the door and walked out, leaving Claire Donovan and our broken past behind. The papers were signed. The moment Claire's signature had dried on the page, something inside me shifted. It wasn't relief, not yet. It wasn't celebration. It was something deeper, the quiet realization that I was finally free. No more pretending. No more second-guessing whether I was enough. No more wondering if the woman I shared a bed with was living a double life. I was done. The penthouse, once a symbol of our success, now felt like nothing more than a cage I had finally unlocked. The moment I stepped out of the door, I walked without hesitation, my steps purposeful. There was no turning back. When I reached the elevator, I pressed the button and waited. As the doors opened, I took one last glance at the life I was leaving behind. Claire had spent years building her empire. She had built her career, her reputation, her dominance in the corporate world. And yet, in just a matter of days, it had all crumbled beneath her. Because she had forgotten the most important rule of power. Never underestimate the people you think are beneath you. I stepped inside, the elevator doors closing with a finality that matched the end of our marriage. The next phase of my life had already begun. The divorce battle. I wasn't naive enough to think Claire would go down without a fight. The ink had barely dried before she tried to negotiate terms. Claire, we don't have to make this ugly, Ethan. Me? It already is. Claire, we built a life together. I deserve something. Me? You deserve exactly what you left me with. Nothing. She didn't reply after that. But I knew she wasn't giving up. Claire was a fighter. She had built her empire through strategy, precision, and calculated risks. And now, She was applying those same tactics to our divorce. She had lawyers. She had money. And she had every intention of making sure she didn't walk away empty-handed. But here's what she forgot. I knew her playbook better than anyone. I had been her strategist for years. I knew exactly how she thought, how she manipulated, how she positioned herself to always come out on top. This time, she wasn't winning. My lawyer, Jacob Carter, was ruthless in the courtroom. He had seen every kind of corporate divorce imaginable, and when I laid out the evidence of Claire's affair, the financial fraud, and her misuse of company funds, he barely even blinked. "She's going to come at you hard," he warned me. "But she has no leverage. Not anymore." I smirked. I know. Claire tried everything. She tried to push for alimony, denied. She tried to claim joint assets. Her claims were dismissed. She even tried to appeal to my emotions, sending me long-winded emails about the life we had built together, the years we had shared, and how she didn't want to be my enemy. I ignored them. Because here's the thing. Claire had already made herself my enemy the moment she betrayed me. The court ruled in my favor on every count. Claire left the marriage with exactly what she deserved. Nothing. The final goodbye after everything was finalized. I sat in my new apartment, looking over the last piece of legal documentation. It was done. It was really, truly over. I had thought this moment would feel like revenge. I had thought I would feel the sweet satisfaction of knowing I had taken her down, made her suffer, watched her lose. But as I sat there, staring at the papers, I realized I didn't feel any of that. What I felt was peace. For the first time in years, I wasn't tethered to someone else's ambition. I wasn't sacrificing my happiness for someone else's success. I wasn't waiting for the next betrayal, the next cold lie, the next empty moment where I wondered if my wife even saw me anymore. I was free. I exhaled slowly, leaned back, and let a small, genuine smile spread across my face. Claire Donovan was no longer my problem. And that was the greatest victory of all. 6 months later, I stood outside Stratoscorp's headquarters, staring up at the gleaming tower that had once been Claire's kingdom. The building was the same, the company still intact, but its leader, the woman who once ruled this empire, was gone. The fallout had been brutal. After our divorce was finalized, Claire had tried to salvage what she could of her reputation, but the damage was already done. Stratoscorp's investors had lost faith. The company's stock had taken a hit, and the board, eager to distance themselves from the scandal, had wasted no time in appointing a new CEO. Ava Sinclair, the same woman who had helped me expose Claire's corruption, was now the one running the company she had spent decades building. The irony was almost poetic. Claire, once the queen of this empire, had been erased from its legacy. I adjusted the cuff of my suit jacket and stepped inside. The receptionist greeted me with a polite smile, one that held no recognition. Good. For years, I had been Claire Donovan's shadow, the quiet strategist standing just outside the limelight, the man people barely noticed in the background. Now, I was something else. I had spent the last 6 months building my own company, a consulting firm specializing in corporate restructuring. With my knowledge of strategy, business acquisitions, and crisis management, I had created something that was mine. Not Claire's, not Stratoscorp's, just mine. Ava was waiting for me in her new office, her hands folded neatly on the desk. "Ethan," she greeted, standing up to shake my hand. "Glad you could make it." I nodded. "Congratulations, by the way. I see you're settling in." She smirked. "Let's just say, cleaning up Claire's mess has kept me busy." I took a seat across from her, leaning back. "So, what's the status?" Ava exhaled, tapping her nails against the desk. "Stratoscorp is stabilizing. We lost a few investors, but we're bouncing back. Claire's fraud case is still under review, but legally, the company has distanced itself from her. She's persona non grata." I arched a brow. "And Liam?" Ava scoffed. "Disappeared. Probably off spending what little money Claire managed to give him before everything went to hell." I smirked. Figures. Liam had never been in this for the long haul. He had been a distraction for Claire, a way for her to feel powerful and desired. But the moment her world collapsed, he ran. And Claire? She had no one left. Ava leaned forward. I have a proposal for you, Ethan. I nodded for her to continue. We want to bring you on as a consultant, she said. You were part of this company's foundation, even if your name was never on the headlines. You understand corporate structure better than anyone. Stratos Corp could use your expertise. I considered her words, rolling them over in my mind. 6 months ago, I would have jumped at the chance to walk back into these halls and prove that I had always been more than just Claire Donovan's husband. But now, I smiled. I appreciate the offer, Ava, but I have my own company now. And for the first time in years, I'm not building something for someone else. Ava's lips curled into a knowing smile. Good. You deserve that. I stood, shaking her hand. But if you ever need outside expertise, give me a call. She nodded. Likewise. As I walked out of Stratos Corp for the last time, I realized something. I had one. Not just in the courtroom. Not just in the public scandal that had left Claire disgraced. I had won my life back. And that was the greatest victory of all. 1 year later, I never imagined that the day would come when I could think of Claire Donovan and feel nothing. No anger. No regret. No bitterness. Just indifference. I was sitting at a small cafe downtown, sipping my espresso as I scrolled through the latest business headlines. Stratos Corp was thriving under Ava's leadership, their scandal now a distant memory, their reputation slowly restored. Claire, on the other hand, had faded from the corporate world. After her forced resignation, she had tried to stage a comeback, attempting to rebrand herself as a business consultant. But no one wanted her. The stain of her scandal had been too deep. Investors wouldn't touch her. CEOs didn't trust her. She had become what she feared most, irrelevant. I set my cup down, stretching out my fingers as I closed the news app. That chapter of my life was over. And I was better for it. I had built something new, something of my own. My corporate consulting firm had taken off faster than I anticipated. CEOs and board members sought my expertise, valuing the very skill set Claire had once taken for granted. I was no longer in the shadows, no longer the man behind someone else's success. I was the success. As I leaned back in my chair, savoring the morning quiet, the last person I ever expected to see walked through the cafe doors. Claire. She hadn't noticed me yet. She moved toward the counter, her posture still upright, her clothes still polished. But there was something different. The sharp confidence she once carried was gone. Her presence didn't command the room anymore. No one looked up in admiration or intimidation. She was just another person. I almost let it go. Almost let her walk out of the cafe without acknowledging her. But then, she turned. Our eyes met. And for a split second, time rewound. Not to the betrayal. Not to the scandal. But to who we used to be. The young couple who started out with dreams bigger than their bank accounts. The woman I once loved. The life we built before ambition turned to greed. Before love turned to power struggles. Her lips parted slightly, like she wasn't sure if she should acknowledge me. Finally, she took a slow step forward. Ethan. I tilted my head. Claire. She studied me for a long moment. You look different. I smirked. You don't. She exhaled, a soft, bitter chuckle escaping her lips. I deserved that. I took a sip of my espresso, watching her. I assume you're still trying to rebuild? She sighed, rubbing her temple. I'm trying, but doors keep closing. I nodded. That's how consequences work. Her jaw clenched slightly, but she didn't argue. She hesitated before speaking again. Do you ever regret it? I raised a brow. Regret what? Her voice was quieter now. Everything. Us. The way it ended. I leaned back in my chair, considering her question. There was a time when I might have said yes. A time when I thought our marriage had been worth saving. A time when I believed that love could withstand betrayal, that years together counted for something. But now, I met her gaze. Not for a second. She flinched, but I didn't soften the blow. She needed to hear it. We had spent 20 years together. She had taken me for granted, assumed I would always be in her corner, always be the silent force supporting her rise. But she had been wrong. Because in the end, I didn't just survive without her, I thrived. Claire let out a slow breath, nodding as she accepted my answer. I guess I deserved that too. For once, She wasn't trying to manipulate me. She wasn't trying to fight, to defend, to twist the narrative. She just accepted it. She glanced at her watch, then back at me. I should go. I gave a small nod. Take care, Claire. She hesitated for just a moment, then offered me a faint smile, the first genuine one I had seen in years. You too, Ethan. And just like that, she walked out of my life. No grand confrontation. No dramatic closing scene. Just two people who once had everything together and now had nothing left to say. I watched her disappear into the city streets, then turned back to my coffee. The past was where it belonged. And for the first time in my life, I was completely free.